I left the army with a duffel bag, a folded flag, and a son who barely recognized me. 15 years in uniform, 2 deployments, 1 dead husband, and 0 backup plans. When I came home, I wasn't looking for a fresh start. I just needed to breathe. So, when my sister Naomi offered to let me and Trey stay at her place for a while, I said yes. Not because I trusted her, just because I was tired. Naomi had it all together, or at least that's what she wanted the world to see. Big house in Fort Worth, white marble kitchen counters, imported rugs, 3 different kinds of oat milk in the fridge. She ran a defense staffing agency that made way too much money for someone who used to copy my homework in high school. But hey, maybe she grew up. Maybe we both had. The first night there, Trey barely touched his food. Naomi had made roasted salmon with asparagus and wild rice. I read this in a lifestyle blog. Energy. Trey just pushed it around his plate. I asked if he was okay, and he nodded, then looked at Naomi for a second too long. I figured he was just adjusting. The kid had spent most of his life with my husband's parents while I was overseas, getting used to mom being home and living with an aunt he barely knew. That'd throw any 8-year-old off. Naomi poured herself a glass of wine and gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You'll get back on your feet soon. No rush," she said, like I was some wounded bird she'd scooped off the side of the highway. I smiled back, but my jaw clenched. I hated feeling like a project. We settled into a rhythm. I handled Trey's school runs, cooked dinners, tried to make the guest room feel like home. Naomi was mostly in her office, taking calls at weird hours, speaking in clipped tones about contracts and federal compliance and non-disclosure terms. I tuned it out. I was busy rewriting my resume and trying to figure out how to live as a civilian again. Spoiler. There's no manual for that. 3 weeks in, Trey pulled me aside one morning while I was making coffee. He was still in his pajamas, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mama," he said, "I heard Aunt Naomi talking on the phone last night." I didn't look up from the mug. "Okay, and?" "She said you're a problem. She said she's handling it." That made me pause. I turned to face him. His face was serious, eyes wide, lips pressed together. Not joking, not being dramatic. "Trey, what exactly did you hear?" "I was getting water. Her door was open a little. She said you weren't supposed to come back." I crouched to his level. "You sure she wasn't talking about work stuff?" He hesitated. "She said your name. She said, 'Lena's making things complicated. I need this clean.'" Then he added, "She sounded mad, not like the nice voice she uses with you." I didn't know what to say. I wanted to tell him he was wrong. That he misheard. That maybe Naomi was just venting about the stress of having company. But something about the way Trey said it, calm, factual, made my stomach twist. I brushed his hair back and said, "Thanks for telling me. Don't worry, okay? Mommy's got it." But I didn't have it. Not really. That day, I kept replaying his words in my head. "Lena's making things complicated. I need this clean." It sounded like something out of a bad movie. And Naomi? She acted like nothing was wrong, made avocado toast for breakfast, asked if I wanted to join her for yoga. She even offered to take Trey to the bookstore while I worked on job applications. If that was supposed to reassure me, it didn't. It just made everything feel weirder. That night, I stood outside her office door after Trey went to bed. I didn't mean to snoop, but I heard her voice. Low, focused, and angry. "No," I said, "I want it resolved. I'm not going to keep explaining myself." She snapped. Then a pause. "No. She doesn't know. But if she starts asking questions, you'll handle it." I stepped back before I could hear more. My heart was pounding in my ears. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, I tried to act normal. Made eggs, packed Trey's lunch, smiled like everything was fine. Inside, I was spiraling. Maybe I was reading into it. Maybe Naomi was dealing with some shady vendor. Maybe it had nothing to do with me. But I couldn't ignore the knot in my gut. That thing they always tell you in the military, trust your instincts. Yeah, mine were screaming. Still, I told myself I was being paranoid. I'd seen too much war, too many lies, too many layers. Maybe I was transferring. Maybe I was broken. Then, the brakes failed. I was driving Trey to school on a 2-lane road. not even going fast. When I pressed the brake pedal to slow down before a red light, it went all the way to the floor. Nothing. No resistance. No sound. Just dead. Luckily, I wasn't far from the intersection. I yanked the emergency brake, and we jolted to a stop. Hard. But safe. Trey screamed. I was shaking. We were lucky. Stupidly lucky. The mechanic later said the brake line had been tampered with. Not rust. Not wear and tear. Tampered. Clean cut. He asked if I'd had any work done recently. I said no. I didn't tell Naomi what happened. I didn't trust her enough to share the truth, and I sure as hell didn't want to see how she'd fake being surprised. I told her it was just a car thing, nothing big, but that night, when Trey curled up next to me in bed and whispered, "I told you." I didn't argue. I didn't sleep again. I just stared at the ceiling, wondering what Naomi was really capable of, and why my sister, my own flesh and blood, might want me gone. I didn't eat breakfast that morning. I sat there, staring at my coffee like it might tell me what to do next. Trey was at school, and Naomi had left for a client lunch, which probably meant she'd be gone a few hours. The house was quiet, too quiet, and for the first time since I moved in, I noticed how cold it actually felt. I stood up and walked toward Naomi's home office. The door was closed, but unlocked. I'd never gone in before, not because I wasn't curious, but because I was trying to be respectful. Now? Respect was off the table. The office smelled like expensive perfume and something chemical, like toner or dry cleaning. Her desk was spotless. Too spotless. Not a single paper out of place. No post-its. No open drawers. Either she was extremely organized or she didn't do real work in here. I sat in her chair and tried to open the bottom drawer. Locked. Of course. I checked her bookshelf rows of fake business books and a few decorative trophies about excellence and leadership. She even had a framed photo of her and Dad from his retirement ceremony. I stared at it for a second. I remembered that day. I'd just come back from a deployment. Naomi showed up in heels and a designer dress and made the whole thing about her. I moved to the filing cabinet. Locked too. But the top drawer wasn't. Inside, there were folders labeled vendor contracts, payroll, gov compliance. All looked clean. Too clean. I flipped through a few pages but didn't find anything off. But it was obvious what I was doing. I was digging without a plan, without knowing what I was even looking for. I gave up after 10 minutes and went back to the kitchen. I was about to make another cup of coffee when I saw Trey's drawing on the fridge. It was a crayon sketch of me, him, and Naomi, all three of us holding hands. My stomach turned. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Janelle. "Hey, heard you were back in town. Coffee soon." I hadn't talked to Janelle in over a year. She was one of the few people from my military life I actually stayed in touch with. She'd gone into law after her second tour and now worked on cases involving military fraud and whistleblowing. If anyone would understand what I was feeling, it was her. I replied, "Soon as possible." We met at a coffee shop near the courthouse, the kind of place with overpriced cold brew and too many people wearing suits who pretended to like it. Janelle looked the same, confident, sharp, tired in the eyes like someone who's seen too much. "So what's going on?" she asked, after the first sip. I gave her the basics. Moving in with Naomi, Trey's warning, the brakes. Her expression didn't change, but she leaned in, listening harder. I told her about what I heard Naomi say on the phone. The weird behavior, the money stuff. She nodded slowly. "You think she's trying to kill you?" I blinked. "I think she doesn't want me around. I think she's hiding something." And if Trey hadn't said anything, I might have ignored it. I mean, I almost did. Janelle set her cup down. "You said she runs a defense staffing firm, right? I've heard that name before. Fletcher Partners. They've been flagged for some shady contracts in the past. No charges stuck, but a few red flags. You think she's using your identity?" I didn't know how to answer that, because I hadn't even considered it until that moment. Could Naomi be using my name, my veteran status, for her business? Janelle pulled out her laptop and started typing. "Let me dig a little. If anything has your name attached, it should show up. And if she's gotten access to any of your military benefits or survivor payouts from Ethan's death, we'll see it." Just hearing Ethan's name hit me like a gut punch. I hadn't even thought about how this might tie back to him. He died in an IED blast on a routine inspection. The army called it a tragedy, but even then, something felt off. He'd been paranoid before that trip, saying something wasn't right. I chalked it up to deployment stress. I got home before Naomi did. Trey was back from school, watching cartoons, his shoes still on, which he knew better than to do. I kissed the top of his head. "You okay, baby?" He nodded. "Are you mad at Aunt Naomi?" That stopped me cold. "Why would you ask that?" He shrugged. "She said you've been acting ungrateful." Of course she did. Classic Naomi make me look unstable, difficult, like a burden. It was the same dynamic we'd had growing up. She always played the victim when I caught her in a lie. "I'm not mad," I told him. "I'm just trying to figure something out." He looked at me, serious again. "I'm glad you believe me now." I hugged him a little longer than usual. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind kept looping through everything. The brake failure. The phone call. The money. Ethan. The idea that Naomi might be using me to scam the government, that she might have had something to do with Ethan's death? I didn't want to go there. Not yet. But my gut said this wasn't just about sibling rivalry or old grudges. The next day, Janelle sent me a file. It was a copy of a contract between Fletcher Partners and a military subcontractor, listing me, Lena Morrison, as an advisory consultant. Signature and all. Except I never signed it. Never even saw it. Attached was a federal grant receipt. Funds disbursed under my veteran ID number. Amount? $94,000. All of it already transferred to a business account. My hands went cold. She was using me. My name, my record, my service. And she didn't even bother hiding it well. She thought I was too dumb, too broken, or too dependent to notice. I forwarded everything to a flash drive. Just in case, Naomi came home late that night, reeking of wine and fake charm. "Long day," she said, tossing her keys on the counter like nothing had changed. "Busy with work?" I asked. She smiled. "Always." I smiled back, and I meant none of it. I waited until she was out again before I printed the contract and the funding report. I didn't want to keep it digital. Naomi wasn't dumb, and I had no idea what kind of surveillance crap she had installed in her office, her Wi-Fi, or even this house. For all I knew, the fridge could be listening. I slipped the papers into a manila folder and shoved them deep into my rucksack, tucked between old service documents and Trey's birth certificate. If anything happened, I wanted someone to know that I hadn't imagined all this, that she'd faked my signature, that she was laundering money using my name. But what scared me more than the money was the calm she wore every day. The way she looked me in the eye while feeding my kids spaghetti, acting like she didn't have stolen federal funds sitting in her bank account. The worst part? I'd started wondering if Ethan had figured this out too. I called Janelle again. She picked up on the second ring, like she hadn't stopped waiting. "She's using my identity for government fraud," I said, skipping hello. "I need to know if this has anything to do with Ethan." "You think your husband was targeted?" she asked. Not shocked. Just verifying. I don't know what to think anymore. "No, let me check something. You said he died on a contractor site in Afghanistan?" "Yeah, mid-rotation. He was inspecting an ops center for a subcontractor that Naomi had bragged about partnering with." She went quiet for a second. Then, "Okay, I'm going to need a few hours." I hung up and stared at the wall. If Naomi had anything to do with Ethan's death, I wasn't just dealing with identity theft. I was sitting across the table from someone who might have arranged to kill my husband, but before I could go full spiral, Trey walked in, holding something in his hand. "Mom," he said quietly, "I found this under Aunt Naomi's printer." It was a thumb drive, plain black, no label. He handed it to me like it was radioactive. "You didn't plug it in, did you?" "No," he said. "But I saw her using it." She looked mad. I opened my laptop, disabled the Wi-Fi, and plugged it in. There were two folders. One said Advisory Docs. The other just said Cleanup. I clicked Cleanup. Inside were voice memos. I clicked the first. A woman's voice, Naomi said. "She's not going to back off. If I can't buy her silence, we'll move to Plan B." I froze. Trey sat next to me. "Is that?" "Yes," I said, slamming the laptop shut. "That's her." I backed up the contents and ejected the drive. Later that night, Naomi came home earlier than usual. She walked in like nothing was off. She smiled, asked how my day went, offered to pour me a drink. She didn't know I'd heard her plotting Plan B, and I wasn't going to let on that I had. But Trey watched her like a hawk. His eyes never left her face. I'd seen that look before on soldiers who'd been through IED blasts and had no idea when the next one was coming. He was scared, and he wasn't pretending otherwise. After she went to bed, I asked him to sleep in my room. I locked the door and wedged a chair under the knob, which felt ridiculous in my own sister's house, but also not. The next morning, I got an email from Janelle. All it said was, "Call me, now." I stepped outside, walked down the block, and dialed. Ethan filed an internal whistleblower complaint with the Department of Defense 2 weeks before he died, she said. He was investigating inflated construction costs from a subcontractor. Guess who was on the board of that subcontractor? I didn't have to guess. Naomi, I said flatly. She didn't sign anything official, but her name shows up in multiple emails. She was listed as a strategic liaison between her company and the contractor Ethan flagged. My knees felt weak. I sat on the curb like someone had punched me in the lungs. If what you're saying is true, it is, Janelle cut in. And if Naomi realized Ethan was onto her, and now you're digging too? She didn't finish the sentence, and she didn't have to. That night, I didn't cook. Naomi didn't ask. Trey and I ate sandwiches in silence while she stayed in her office. Eventually, I walked past her door and heard her on another call. "I don't care what it costs," she said, low and furious. "This ends this week. Got it?" I didn't stop walking. Back in my room, I opened the closet and pulled out an old duffel bag. I stuffed it with what I needed. Documents, clothes for Trey, the thumb drive, the backup flash drive. I had no plan yet, but I was done pretending this was safe. I was done pretending she was my sister. I heard Trey's footsteps behind me. "Are we leaving?" "Not yet," I said. "Are we hiding again?" "Eat it's made here, logic fix." I paused. I didn't want to scare him, but I couldn't lie. "We're getting ready to," I said softly. "But we have to be smart first. We can't just run. We have to make sure she can't find us." He nodded, looking at the bag. "Like a mission?" "Exactly," I said. "Like a mission." He didn't look scared anymore, just ready. I got up early the next morning, before Naomi started her usual phone calls. I made coffee like nothing was wrong, packed Trey's lunch like any other school day, and sent him off with a kiss on the forehead and an extra long hug. He didn't ask any questions. He just looked at me and said, "Be careful." I told him I would. Once he was gone, I took the backup flash drive, the contract files, and the thumb drive Trey had found, and walked 2 blocks to the public library. They had free computers and cameras on the parking lot. Which meant if something happened to me, at least someone would have seen me last. I printed every file emails with my name forged, documents linking Naomi's company to shady defense contracts, voice memo transcripts. The folder kept growing. I shoved it all in a manila envelope, addressed it to Janelle's office, and walked across the street to the UPS store. Overnight delivery. Signature required. I paid cash. Back at the house, Naomi was in her robe, sipping matcha and watching some morning news segment like she didn't have federal crimes sitting on her hard drive. "Sleep okay?" she asked, not even looking up. "Yeah," I said. "You?" "Always." She smiled without teeth. I was halfway to walking past her when she added, "Oh, by the way, I moved your car. The mechanic dropped it off early." My stomach clenched. "You had it brought back?" She nodded. "I figured it's fine now. Brakes fixed. No more near-death experiences." The way she said it like it was a joke made my blood run cold. "Thanks," I mumbled. That afternoon, I called Janelle from a burner phone I bought at a gas station. "The packet's on its way," I said. "I'll have it in the morning," she replied. "In the meantime, I got something else." She paused. "There's a second grant Naomi applied for using your credentials. A post-deployment trauma program that doesn't exist. The approval came through last year. It's listed under your name, your veteran status, your discharge summary, 150,000. I let out a breath. "She's been building this fraud for years," I said. "Yep, and she's not sloppy anymore. She's confident." That's when it hit me. Naomi didn't just steal my name. She built a whole second version of me. One who ran a nonprofit, advised military contractors, spoke at conferences. On paper, Lena Morrison was a model veteran doing good for the world because Naomi made her that way. I was just the real one, inconvenient and in the way. Edits made here, removing the premature escape to fix continuity. That night, after Trey was asleep, I went into the garage to look at my car. Everything looked fine at first glance. But I didn't trust anything anymore. I slid under with a flashlight and spotted something strange, small zip ties holding part of the brake line in place. Not the kind a certified mechanic would use, so either Naomi was fixing her own mess, or she was planting another one. I considered taking the SUV keys and leaving right then, but just as I started to slide out from under the car, I heard the garage door opener hum. Naomi was home. I stayed frozen, hidden by the shadows of my car, until she went inside. I couldn't leave yet. If I took her car now, she'd report it stolen before I made it to the highway. I needed to wait for morning. When I went inside, the house was silent. I slipped into her office one last time, looking for anything I might have missed. I checked behind framed photos, under drawer liners, even inside the trash, and there it was, a half-torn envelope addressed to Langston Private Trust, with a routing number scribbled in red ink. I recognized the name. It was the trust Dad set up for us before he passed. Naomi had told me it was tied up in probate. That we'd sort it out later. There was no probate. She'd already cleaned it out. I took a picture of the envelope and slipped it back exactly where I found it. When I went upstairs, Naomi was in the hallway. "Looking for something?" she asked. I didn't flinch. "Toilet paper." She tilted her head. "Fourth drawer." We stared at each other for a beat too long. Then she smiled again and went into her room. I locked my door that night, but not because I thought it would stop her. I just wanted the illusion of control. Trey curled up next to me, thumb hooked around my arm. I don't think he even realized how tense I was. He whispered, "Are we safe?" I told him yes, and I didn't believe it for a second. I was brushing my teeth when I heard the front door slam. Not just close slam. Heavy and fast, like someone was either furious or needed to make a point. I glanced at the clock. It was 6:42 a.m. Naomi didn't usually leave that early. I moved to the window and peeked through the blinds. Her SUV was gone. I grabbed my phone. No messages from her, no passive-aggressive remarks, which made it worse. Naomi didn't stay quiet unless she was planning something. Trey was still asleep, his arms flung out like a snow angel across my bed. I let him be. He deserved one more normal morning before things stopped pretending to be normal. Downstairs, I poured myself a cup of coffee and opened the fridge. The oat milk was gone. All 3 cartons. Petty? Sure. But it was her way of letting me know she was watching everything I touched. Edits made here, vehicle logic fix. I went out to the garage. My car was the only option left. I couldn't trust it, but I didn't have a choice. I grabbed a pair of wire cutters from the tool bench and crawled underneath. I snipped the zip ties she'd planted, and checked the brake lines 3 times. I pumped the pedal with my hand until my arm cramped. Resistance. It held. It had to. My phone buzzed. Janelle again. "Got your packet. Holy hell. This is bigger than I thought. I want to loop in someone from DOD. You trust me?" I texted back, "Do it." I didn't care about keeping this quiet anymore. Naomi had crossed the line a long time ago. I was just the last one to notice. Edits made here, removed repetitive packing. I went back upstairs. I didn't need to pack. I'd already done that days ago. I pulled the duffel bag from the closet. The one stuffed with documents and clothes. I checked it one last time to make sure the flash drives were still there. While zipping it up, I heard Trey's voice from the hallway. "She went through your room last night." I turned. He was standing there barefoot, rubbing his eyes. "What?" I woke up and had to pee. "I saw her. She was in here. Your closet was open." I felt the floor shift under me. "Did she see you?" He shook his head. "I hid, like you showed me." That hit harder than it should have. I crouched and put my hands on his shoulders. "You did good, baby. You did exactly right." He looked up at me and whispered, "I don't like it here." "I know," I said. "We're leaving. Today." We had breakfast in silence. I didn't bother with anything fancy. Toast, eggs, apple slices, Simple, fast, easy to clean up if we had to disappear in 10 minutes. After I dropped Trey at school, I drove straight to a storage unit I'd rented online 2 days ago under a fake name. I paid cash up front and didn't give a forwarding address. I dropped off the duffel bag with our essentials and locked the unit tight. Then I sat in the car and stared at the steering wheel for a full 5 minutes. This wasn't just about documents or money anymore. Naomi had been in my room. She'd opened my closet. She knew I was preparing something. Back at the house, I went straight to the kitchen and opened the drawer where I'd hidden the spare burner phone. It was gone. I checked the cabinet above the fridge where I'd hidden the original thumb drive. Gone. I checked my rucksack. Still there but lighter. She'd taken something. I sat down at the table, heart thudding in my ears. She wasn't just watching me. She was 2 steps ahead. That's when my phone rang. Not the burner, my real one. The one Naomi assumed I still used for everything. Blocked number. I answered. A man's voice. Calm, professional. Too calm. Miss Morrison, I'm calling on behalf of a mutual associate. She asked me to check in. Said there may be a misunderstanding regarding certain documents. I didn't respond. The voice continued. It would be better for everyone if this misunderstanding didn't go public. There's still time to make this quiet. Who are you? I asked. Let's not make this difficult. You're not the first, and you won't be the last. Click. I stared at the phone. The first? That's when it hit me. Naomi had done this before. Maybe not to family, but to someone. Maybe multiple someones. And if I kept going, I was on that list. I stood up and grabbed my keys. Went to Trey's school. Asked to sign him out early. Said there was a family emergency. The secretary didn't ask questions. I appreciated that. When he got in the car, I didn't say anything for a few blocks. Then I said, "We're not going home." He didn't ask why. He just nodded and looked out the window. We drove around for a while, stopping at a diner 2 towns over for pancakes. Trey ate half of his before asking, "Are we hiding again?" "Yes," I said. "From her?" "Yeah." He nodded like that made perfect sense. Like kids were supposed to have a designated hiding protocol for their aunt. When we got back in the car, I pulled into a parking lot across from Naomi's office building. Big glass windows, secure entry. Cameras everywhere. I parked under a shade tree, far enough away not to be obvious. Trey curled up in the back seat and pulled his hoodie over his head. I watched the front door. I didn't know what I was waiting for, but I knew I'd recognize it when I saw it. The front of Naomi's office building had that fake corporate charm, clean glass, stone facade, potted plants that were probably sprayed with shine every Monday morning. People came and went like clockwork. No one looked stressed. No one looked dangerous. But I knew better than to trust polished exteriors. I waited almost 2 hours before I saw her walk out. Business suit, heels, phone in one hand, iced coffee in the other. She looked like a commercial. She always did. Trey stayed asleep in the back seat, wrapped in a hoodie, legs curled up tight. I didn't wake him. I just watched. Naomi got into a black car, not her SUV, a rental, unmarked, tinted. She pulled out of the lot and merged onto the road heading east. She didn't head home. I called Janelle. "She's moving," I said. "Where?" "Don't know yet, but she's not going back to the house." "She might be pulling out," Janelle said. "Cutting losses. If she thinks you're planning something, she won't wait around to see what it is." That gave me an idea. If Naomi was willing to disappear, maybe she'd be relieved if I did first. I hung up and drove straight to a rundown motel outside Weatherford. No cameras. No front desk after midnight. Cash only. I gave them an alias I came up with on the spot and signed the little card with a squiggle. Inside the room, the AC barely worked, the bed smelled like cigarettes, and the TV was stuck on a local channel selling cookware. It was perfect. I texted Janelle a single word, "Moved." She replied, "Smart." I let Trey sleep on the bed while I paced the floor. I kept thinking about that call from the man who said I wasn't the first. How calm he was. Like this was just business. Like Naomi had a playbook and I was following it step by step. Then I thought about Ethan. 2 weeks before he died, he told me something was off. He didn't say what, just that people were hiding things, that his report had made someone angry. I told him he was being paranoid. I thought about that every time I blinked. The next morning, I put Trey in the car and drove into town for breakfast. We ate cheap pancakes again. He didn't complain. He was more talkative this time, telling me about some kid in his class who always sneezed into his milk. I smiled and nodded, pretending that things were normal. We got back to the motel, and I opened my laptop. Naomi had no idea where we were, but I knew exactly where she'd be, trying to clean up whatever I'd left behind. Janelle called me just before noon. "You're going to want to hear this," she said. "Your sister just moved over $100,000 into an account in the Cayman Islands." Name on the account? Langston Private Investments. My chest tightened. "That's Dad's trust," I said. "No, it's a fake shell. But the name was on that envelope you photographed." Naomi wasn't just bailing. She was emptying everything she'd built and everything she stole. Janelle continued. "She's planning to leave. It's obvious. We can't stop her unless we move now." "Then move," I said. "Pull whatever you need." "I already contacted someone at the Department of Defense," she said. "A real one, named Special Agent Klein. He's been tracking Naomi's defense contracts for over a year. Does he know about me?" "Not yet, but I want you two to meet." I didn't like it. Letting strangers in meant more exposure. But I also didn't have many options left. Klein met me 2 hours later at a used bookstore in a strip mall that smelled like mildew and old coffee. He wore jeans and a windbreaker. Nothing flashy. "Government plane? You're the sister," he said, sitting down across from me. "I'm the one she didn't kill," I replied. He didn't smile. "I've been trying to build a case against Fletcher Partners for a year. No judge wants to sign a warrant without proof the fraud was internal. Until now, it's all just bad accounting and contractor shell games." I handed him the flash drive. "Proof enough?" I asked. He plugged it into his own laptop, glanced at the folders, then looked up at me. "This is more than enough." "Good." He handed me a card. "Until this is over, use this number. Don't call Naomi. Don't text her. Don't go near the house. We'll handle the rest." I left the meeting with a folder full of legal jargon and a headache the size of Texas. Back at the motel, Trey was watching cartoons on mute, chewing on cereal from a plastic cup. He looked up and said, "You look like when you were in the army." "What's that mean?" "Like you're going to do something big." I didn't answer. I just hugged him and told him to finish his cereal. That night, Naomi called me. Not text, not voicemail. A real call. I let it ring. Twice. Then I answered. "Where are you?" she asked, voice tight. "Busy," I said. "Don't play games, Lena. I know what you're doing." "No," I said. "You really don't." She went quiet. Then, "You have no idea who you're messing with." "I think I do," I said. "You wear Chanel perfume and commit federal crimes. Pretty clear." She hung up. I stared at the phone until the screen went black. Then I turned it off completely. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was scared, though I probably should have been, but because my mind couldn't stop running the math on just how far Naomi was willing to go. Every move I made, she'd already accounted for. Every document I uncovered, she'd already buried 5 more. But the call she made, the one where she told me I didn't know who I was messing with, that was panic. It was the first time I heard fear in her voice. By morning, Agent Klein had sent me a short list of instructions. I was to stay put, stay silent, and wait for confirmation that a warrant had been approved. He didn't promise anything, but he didn't sound like he was bluffing either. Trey was drawing something with a crayon on motel notepad paper, 2 stick figures, standing on a hill. One had a cape, the other had a ponytail and a gun. I didn't ask which one I was. "Can I tell you something?" he said, not looking up. "Always. I think she was going to hurt you in the garage. That night when I saw her walking around." I nodded slowly. "Me too." He didn't ask why we were still here, in a motel that smelled like chlorine and burnt toast. He didn't ask why I had 2 prepaid phones now and kept checking the window every 10 minutes. He was 8, but he understood more than I wanted him to. Late afternoon, Klein called. "No hello, no small talk. She's packing," he said. Security camera footage shows her loading hard drives into a travel case. She's scheduled a flight to the Bahamas tomorrow at 5:15 p.m. Private charter. "How's she getting through TSA with all that?" I asked. "She's not. Charter flights bypass most of it. She's using a diplomatic contact to skip customs." "Of course she was. Let me guess," I said. "If she gets on that plane, she's gone for good." She won't make it to the tarmac if we time this right. But we need to catch her in the act. We still don't have a live admission, no confession, no direct tie between her and the attempt on your life. I almost laughed. You want her to say it out loud? We want her to believe she can say it out loud, Klein said. We can create a space where she feels untouchable. People say stupid things when they think they're winning. What kind of space? He paused. Public, familiar, controlled. It didn't take long to decide where. The house? The place Dad left us. Neutral ground. Naomi wouldn't expect me to go back there, not now. Not after everything. Which made it perfect. I agreed to set it up. Klein arranged plainclothes officers to surround the property and installed hidden mics around the living room. They gave me a wire so small it looked like a loose thread. I wore jeans and a t-shirt, nothing special. I didn't want her to think I was making a statement. I just wanted her to show up. Trey stayed at a safe house with Janelle and a retired Marine who owed her a favor. He didn't cry when I left, just said, "Don't let her win." When Naomi pulled into the driveway, she drove Dad's old pickup truck, the one he'd rebuilt by hand before he died. She always hated that thing, which meant she was sending a message. She stepped out of the truck like she was arriving at brunch. Purse over her shoulder, designer sunglasses, calm face. "You really wanted this face-to-face, huh?" she said as she walked through the front door. I was already sitting on the couch, just tying up loose ends. She looked around like she was inspecting a rental property. "Still smells like old coffee and carpet glue." I didn't say anything. Naomi sat across from me and crossed her legs. "So, what's your plan? Going to cry? Threaten me? Tell me I'm a disappointment to the family?" I leaned forward. "No. I just want to hear you say it." "Say what?" "That you tried to kill me," she snorted. "You think that's what this is about? A little brake fluid and you're the star of a conspiracy thriller? You forged my name. You stole hundreds of thousands of dollars. You used Dad's trust to funnel fraud through your company. You're not exactly the first person to get left off a family bank account. And Ethan," I said, "you were tied to that site. The contractor he flagged. The one that got him killed." Naomi didn't blink, but her smile slipped just enough for me to notice. "I didn't touch Ethan," she said. "But let's be real, he wasn't innocent. He found a fire, poked at it, and it burned him. That's not murder, that's natural selection." I stared at her. "And me? You?" She tilted her head. "You were supposed to stay in the army. That was the deal. You disappear overseas. I handle the finances. Everyone wins. Then Ethan dies and you come home early, nosing around, messing everything up. You should have stayed in the desert. Did you plan the breaks?" She sighed, like I was boring her. "I told someone to scare you. That's it. I didn't say kill. People love to overdo things. You said you needed it to be clean. That's a figure of speech." Her voice was louder now, her posture sharper. She leaned in. "I built everything, Lena. Everything. You walked away from the family. I stayed. I dealt with Dad, with his debts, with his failures. I earned this." "You earned what? Federal charges?" "I earned not having to live in your shadow anymore." She stood up and pointed a finger at me. "You were always the hero, the vet, the brave one. I was just the sister with nice shoes and a fake smile." I stayed quiet. Naomi looked around one more time and said, "You've already lost, you just don't know it yet." Then she walked toward the door. She didn't even make it to the handle before two plainclothes officers stepped out from behind the wall and cuffed her. She didn't fight. She just said, "Of course." Like it was inevitable. Like this was always going to end this way. The cuffs clicked shut like punctuation. Naomi didn't yell, didn't flail, didn't cry. She just looked at the officer on her right and said, "Do you know who I am?" Classic move. I half expected her to pull out a business card and a fake smile. Agent Klein stepped out from the hallway, holding the tablet that streamed everything she'd just admitted. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. Naomi looked at the screen, then at me, and her jaw locked like it had been wired shut. "Nice work," he said, nodding at me. I didn't feel victorious. I felt blank. Naomi was escorted out of the house. Her heels echoed against the tile like it was a runway walk, even in handcuffs. That was the thing about her she never knew when she'd already lost. Klein stayed behind. He sat across from me, same spot she'd used 10 minutes earlier, like the couch hadn't absorbed a lifetime of betrayal. "We're freezing her accounts as we speak," he said. "Flights cancelled. Cayman Bank's been notified. It's going to get ugly." "Good," I said. "She'll fight it," he added. "Lawyers, appeals, PR stunts, you name it. She always did fight dirty." He pulled a folder from his bag and slid it over to me. Inside were pages of documentation evidence tying Naomi to a series of financial scams, misuse of government funds, forged grant applications, and laundering through shell corporations. It read like a script from a political crime show. And every few lines, there it was. My name, my military ID, my discharge papers, my signature. "Will I get charged for any of this?" I asked. "No," he said without hesitation. "We've got enough to prove you were impersonated." And frankly, the audio of her admitting to everything just made my life a hell of a lot easier. I closed the folder and set it aside. What happens next? There'll be a federal indictment within a week, a hearing after that. She won't get bail, not with the flight attempt. Then it's trial. I looked around the house, what was left of it. Half the furniture gone, mail stacked in corners, dust gathering on shelves. This used to be our family home. Now it felt like a crime scene with better lighting. "I need to go get my son," I said. Klein nodded. "We'll keep you updated, and if anyone contacts you, anyone at all, call me directly." I left the folder with him. I didn't need to carry the paperwork. I was already carrying enough. Janelle met me outside the safe house, her expression a strange mix of tired pride and deep concern. Trey ran out the front door before I could even park, threw his arms around my waist, and squeezed like he'd been holding his breath the whole time. "She's gone," he said into my stomach. "Yeah," I whispered back. "She's gone." Inside, Janelle handed me a cup of tea I didn't ask for, and a small flash drive. "This one's for you," she said. "Extra copy of everything. Just in case." I held it between my fingers. "If I burn it, will the last 3 months go away?" "Nope," she said, "but it might feel good for a second." I put it in my pocket. Trey curled up next to me on the couch. Janelle sat across from us and said, "I know this might not feel like a win yet, but it is. You did everything right. Feels like I barely survived it. Surviving it is doing it right." The next few days were a blur of forms, phone calls, and official statements. The media caught on fast. Local businesswoman arrested in multi-million-dollar federal fraud scheme. That was one headline. Another just read, "Sister, soldier, survivor." Survivor. I didn't do interviews. I didn't want a platform. I just wanted space. Klein sent regular updates. Naomi pled not guilty, of course. Her lawyers tried to get the confession tossed, claimed it was coercive. It wasn't. The audio was clean, the setup legal, and her arrogance had done most of the work for us. Trey asked a lot of questions about court, about prison, about whether Naomi would ever come back. I told him the truth in pieces, enough for him to understand without handing him the full weight of it. One afternoon, while we were folding laundry in silence, he said, "I don't think she ever liked me." I looked at him. "Why do you say that? She never looked me in the eyes. Not even once." It broke something in me to realize he'd noticed. All the times I'd brushed off her coldness, called it stress or distraction, or just how she is, he had felt it anyway. "She didn't deserve you," I said. "She didn't deserve you either," he replied. I wrapped him in the towel I'd just folded and held him for a while. Naomi's trial date was set 6 months out. She was denied bail. Her lawyers tried everything, but the evidence was airtight. I didn't plan on going to every hearing, just the ones that mattered. Klein and Janelle took the lead on the legal side. I took the lead on rebuilding what Naomi tried to take from me: my life, my kid, and my peace. I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted stability. And I was finally starting to believe I could have it. The courthouse smelled like old wood and fluorescent lights. I don't know why I expected anything else, but I did. Maybe something colder, harsher, but no, just chairs that creaked too loud and a waiting area with vending machines that barely worked. I didn't sit in the front row. I didn't want to be seen on the news. I chose a seat in the back corner, next to a woman in a tan suit who looked like she hadn't blinked in an hour. She never turned her head once, and I appreciated that. Naomi walked in wearing a beige blazer, hair tied tight, like she was going for misunderstood executive. She scanned the room and saw me, and I swear I caught the faintest flicker of a smirk. Not surprise, not shame, just recognition. Like she was clocking me into the scene, the way she'd scan attendees at one of her networking events. The prosecution laid out everything: wire transfers, forged contracts, grant fraud, and the icing on the cake. The recorded conversation where she more or less explained why I was a problem that needed to be handled. Her attorney tried spinning it. Said Naomi was under pressure, that she was forced into bad partnerships, that her comments were frustrated venting, not actual threats. I almost choked on my water. They didn't call me to the stand. Klein and Janelle agreed it was better that way. My voice had already been heard literally on the audio. Anything I added would have been emotional, and emotion made things messier in court. I wasn't there to give a performance. I was there to watch it end. The defense tried calling her a successful businesswoman whose personal relationships clouded her judgment. Right, because when most people have a tough time with family, they just go ahead and forge federal documents and try to sabotage your car. Trey stayed home with Janelle that day. He wanted to come, but I told him the courtroom wasn't a place for kids, especially when it involved someone he once called Aunt. He asked me to tell him everything afterward. I said I would, and for once, I meant it. It took 4 days of testimony before the jury was sent out. The waiting room after that was quiet. No dramatic pacing. No tears, just paper cups of weak coffee and people avoiding eye contact. When the jury came back, the verdict was read in under 2 minutes. Guilty on 7 counts: fraud, conspiracy, attempted misuse of federal funds, and attempted endangerment of a civilian through criminal negligence. They didn't go for attempted murder, but honestly, I didn't care. She wasn't walking free. That's what mattered. Naomi didn't flinch when the sentence was read: 18 years in federal prison, with no chance of parole for the first 10. She didn't cry, didn't gasp, didn't look at me once. The judge asked if she had anything to say before sentencing. She stood up, straightened her blazer, and said, "I built something people respected. I made something out of nothing. But none of you cared about that. You just wanted a headline." Then she sat down again, like she'd just dropped the mic at a press conference. Outside the courthouse, reporters tried shoving mics into my face. I didn't stop. I didn't say a word. I just kept walking to the car. Inside, I sat with my hands on the wheel for a long time, not turning the key, just staring ahead. It wasn't relief. Not exactly. It was something more complicated, like finding out your tumor was finally gone but you'd still need months of radiation. Back home, Trey was on the couch with a blanket over his head, watching cartoons on mute again. His new thing. I sat down beside him. "It's over," I said. He peeked out from the blanket. "She's going to jail?" "Yeah, a long time." He pulled the blanket down to his chin. "Does that mean we get our house back?" "Not the old one," I said. "But we'll get something better." He thought about that for a second. "Can we get one with a blue door?" I nodded. "Sure." That night, I opened my laptop for the first time in weeks and started writing everything down. Not because I wanted to relive it, but because I wanted to put it somewhere that wasn't inside my head anymore. I didn't write it like a diary. I wrote it like a report, a military habit I hadn't shaken. Dates, names, conversations, evidence, not for publishing, not for court, just for me. A month later, Klein called. Naomi had been moved to a federal facility out of state. Low profile. White collar. She'd already filed an appeal, which he said wouldn't go anywhere, but she'd filed it anyway. "She's still playing chess," I said. "Only now she's on a board where we see every move," he replied. That night, I took Trey for burgers. No ceremony, no symbolism, just burgers. He asked if he could get fries and a shake, and I said yes. When we sat down to eat, he looked at me and said, "Do you still think about her?" "Sometimes. I have knots of this as awe." "Do you miss her?" I paused. "No, but I miss what I thought she was." He dipped a fry in his shake and said, "That's fair." We didn't say much after that, just ate. And for the first time in months, everything felt normal, not perfect, not healed, but normal in a way that felt earned. I went to sleep that night without locking the door twice. 3 months after the verdict, we moved into a small rental with peeling paint and a crooked mailbox. It wasn't much, but it was ours. Trey picked the room with the bigger closet and told me he was going to turn it into a secret lab. I told him I'd consider it as long as there were no explosions. I unpacked slower than I ever had in my life. Every item I pulled from a box felt like a question. Do I still want this? Did this come from before or after everything broke? I threw a lot of things out. Naomi had given me half of it anyway. The insurance finally released the funds from the destroyed home. Not the money Naomi tried to steal through her schemes, just the basic homeowner's policy. It wasn't a fortune, but it gave me room to breathe. I put half in savings and used the rest to buy furniture that didn't come with memories. I got a job with a nonprofit that helped military families navigate VA claims. It was run by a retired Marine who didn't care what you wore or how many times you cursed in a sentence. My kind of environment. They asked me to speak at a workshop about transitioning out of active duty. I kept it short and blunt. People seemed to like that. Janelle visited once a week. Sometimes with files, sometimes with takeout, sometimes just to sit. She didn't ask how I was doing unless she actually had time to listen. That made her the kind of friend I could keep around. One afternoon, while organizing a box of Ethan's things I hadn't touched in years, I found a sealed envelope tucked inside an old field notebook. It was addressed to me. No date, no stamp, just my name and his handwriting. I opened it and found a single sheet of paper. It wasn't a love letter. It wasn't poetic. It was a list. 3 names. 2 companies. One phrase at the bottom. If anything happens to me, start here. Don't trust anyone. I stared at the names for a long time. 2 were already on the federal case against Naomi. The third was new, a private investigator based in Maryland. I made a copy and sent it to Klein. He called 2 days later. Where'd you find this? In a notebook of Ethan's. I hadn't looked through it before. This last name Vickers, he's a subcontractor Naomi used. We hadn't connected him directly to Ethan's case until now. Think it matters? Klein hesitated. Let's just say it adds weight to the theory that Naomi's hands weren't clean when Ethan died. I didn't know what to do with that. On one hand, it validated everything I'd feared. On the other, it didn't change anything. Ethan was still gone. I was still here. And Naomi was still behind bars, working her way through a system she'd once manipulated like it was a board game. I started therapy, not because someone told me to, but because Trey asked me if I ever had nightmares too. I figured if he was brave enough to talk about his, I could stop pretending I didn't have any. He saw a counselor too, someone trained to work with kids who've been through trauma within the family structure. I hated that term. Sounded like a legal memo. But it helped him. He started sleeping through the night again. He laughed more. Sometimes he still whispered, like we were hiding, but less often now. One evening, after dinner, he asked, "Do you think Daddy would be proud of you?" I looked at him and said, "I think he'd be proud of us." And I meant it. Because Trey had been the one to speak up. He'd been the one who listened when I was too distracted, too tired, too broken to notice what was right in front of me. I got promoted at the nonprofit. It wasn't a big deal, just a title and a little more pay, but it felt like a step toward being someone again. Not the victim, not the widow, not the sister of that woman who's in federal prison. Just Lena, the woman who showed up, did her job, and didn't flinch when paperwork got messy. One of the directors suggested I apply for a grant to build a sub-program for female veterans dealing with family abuse. At first, I said no. The idea of running anything again made my stomach twist. But then I thought about how many other women might be stuck in some version of my story, silenced by trust, trapped by loyalty, ignored by systems designed to protect people like Naomi. So I said yes. The program launched 6 months later. Small, local, underfunded. But it was real. We called it Second Mission, because for a lot of us, survival after service is a mission no one prepares you for. One afternoon, Janelle brought over cupcakes to celebrate the program's first anniversary. Trey decorated the living room with blue construction paper and drew a sign that said, "Mom's Mission. 100% complete." I told him missions never really end. They just shift objectives. He said that sounded boring and asked if we could get pizza instead. We did. The last letter I got from the federal court said Naomi's final appeal had been denied. She'd be serving the full sentence, minus time for good behavior. I folded the letter and tucked it into the same folder where I kept Ethan's note. Not for closure, just so I'd never forget what it cost to stay quiet too long. That night, I stood outside on the porch with a cup of tea and watched Trey chase fireflies across the yard. The sky was clear, the kind of dark that made you feel like the stars were trying harder to be noticed. I didn't feel peace exactly. But I didn't feel danger anymore, and that was enough.